Hello and welcome to busyworksbeats.com. I need you guys to smash that like button. Let's continue this melody series right here, busyworksbeats.com/music theory. Let me show you how to make better melodies in a matter of a couple minutes. Firstly, what we're going to do is we're using Flex here just for FL stock users. Go to the Essential Pianos under the store. Just download these with the download icon. Look for the Essential Pianos, then go to where it says Yamaha C7. This is a good starting point. Let's turn the metronome on. Now for the melody, I got this idea from Jeff Schneider, and he gave a different perspective, which is to think of the raised third as not a raised third, but a tenth. So what does that mean? So if we label all the white notes starting from C, we're going to create what's called a scale. So this is C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then the pattern repeats itself. Okay, so think of a scale as a sequence of notes that people just like to hear in a specific order, because that's basically what a scale is. There are tons of scales out there. Okay, so when I say the 10th, we're actually counting what are called scale degrees. Each note within a scale has a nomenclature to it. So here the first note is called the tonic, and it's called the first because it's the first note of a scale. We started here at C. D would be the second because we started at C, and this is the second note in the scale. So let's continue that same process. This E is the third note, F is the fourth note in the scale, G is the fifth note in the scale, A is the sixth note in the scale, B is the seventh, C is the eighth, D is the ninth, and E is the 10th. So we can have the same note in a different octave as a different role melodically. So what I'm saying is the raised third, why do we call it a third? First, second, third. The raised third is also the 10th. Okay, and the 10th plays a very specific role, and Jeff Schneider has a deeper video, but the way I use it is I'll map out what's called a ninth chord, and then I'll go up to the 10th and kind of, so let's show you guys how to do this. Okay, so let's start here at C. Now to create our chords, we're going to skip every other note within the scale. So C, skip D, go to E, skip F, go to G, skip A, go to B, skip C, go to D. So this is a 5-note chord here, and we're going to call it there's a lot to teach you guys, so I'm trying to not to overwhelm you with information. But let's count this out in chord codes. This is 0, meaning the point of no distance. So this is 0, no relative distance. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If you play these notes together, you get a major chord. Okay, so the major chord has a DNA to it, which I call chord codes. So 0, 4, 7 will always create a major chord. So 0, 4, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 0, 4, 7 creates what's called the major 7th chord all the time. Okay, now when we add that final note up top, that would be 12, 13, 11, 12, 13, 14. So 0, 4, 7, 11, 14. That's a lot of numbers, but this creates what's called the C, which is the root note, and then the chord type is based on those chord codes. So in this case, the major ninth is the chord type, so we call it by the root note, C, and then the chord type, major ninth. Now I'm playing very aggressively, so let's pull it back. Okay, so when I'm playing a ninth chord like this, we can count up. So it's the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth. So that's why we call this a ninth chord, is because we're playing all the way up to the ninth scale degree with what are called chord extensions. So normally what most people do in EDM, they'll take this third and they'll raise it up an octave to reposition their chords. And they usually do this with seventh chords. Let's go down an octave. And it gives it that R&B type of vibe, very soulful vibe. Okay, but but in order to do that, we usually omit or remove notes. Okay, so what I'm saying is we're repositioning in that case, that third, pulling it up an octave, and then we're taking away the ninth. So that's normally how it would be voiced in R&B or like a soul type chord progression. But instead of getting rid of the third, let's add the 10th scale degree. So we're taking this E, which is the third, and we're adding it up an octave. So this is the 10th, and this will be a pivotal note. So in guitar, for example, you have a limited amount of strings. So what they do to make their chords sound bigger, here's a ninth chord, or excuse me, an 11th chord technique. Here's a ninth chord. And what they'll do on guitar is play 3 of the notes. They'll skip the 7th because we already have what's called the third, and they'll play the ninth. Okay, and that's how they create these big sounds, is they add the ninth in as a chord extension without the seventh. So again, the conundrum that we're solving for is that we're not removing notes. We're not removing the third and we're not removing the seventh. We're adding the 10th onto our chord, and this will create a different melodic sound. And now let's say we want to build a chord here at C as our ending chord. The question is, how do you create the chord for this? You're going to work backwards this time. So instead of skipping the notes going up the scale, we're going to skip the notes going down the scale. So we're going to add A, skip G, go to F, skip E, go to D. And we could extend this further, but let's just see what it sounds like. Okay, now we could take it further by adding B, but this will make this a very specific chord. And it won't sound good, and I'll explain why. It's because it creates what's called a diminished chord at the bottom, and this will be basically a minor 7 flat 5 chord. You don't need to memorize what that means. It basically, this is the normal minor 7th. Okay, but what we're doing is we're taking this 5th and pulling it down 1. That's what creates that flat 5 sound. But long story short, normally this is not where I would position the minor 7 flat 5. So in that case, we either need to raise the third. In this case, we're not adding the 10th, we're just raising the third. But then that takes away from our melodic focus of these notes. Da, 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 da. So if D up here is the new top note, it takes away from the emphasis that we're moving to C. I found that when you guys make chord progressions, the top note of the chord usually guides you through your chord progression, usually. Okay, and in this case, if we insert a new top note, it will change the direction of our melody. Okay, whereas if we keep, what we can do is either omit it or simply just not extend the chord that far down. Okay, so in this case, we're going to make an executive decision and say, remove the B in this case, so it's not that big chord. But it needs a little more density. It's a little too hollow. So what we could do is, instead of landing at B, we could use a different note. In this case, using A to reinforce the 5th and the bass, we could try that. That's one way to do it, or you could simply just add the note D down an octave. Okay, so this is the basics. We were covering tenths. I know I went, full form with the education here, but I want people to have a foundational understanding of what is actually happening. That's why I have full courses that have hours and hours of training, is because I show you guys why something works, not just what to do. Because if you just do what to do, you're going to have the same, your beats are going to sound the same over and over and over again. You're not going to understand the pattern as to why something works. Okay, so now let's get into, now if you do want to go further, go to busyworksbeats.com/music theory essentials and look for the music theory essentials course package that will guide you through the foundations of music theory. Okay, so I have to shortcut a lot of the information today. We just don't have enough time. Okay, so next, let's use these tenths here, but where do we start here? C. I feel like we were up an octave. And what we're going to do this time around is start picking the notes as opposed to playing them all at once. Okay, so let's give you guys a structure. Now, we had a lot of notes we could have used. To simplify this, let us create what's called a ninth chord, or a major ninth or a minor ninth chord, in this case a major ninth, and we're only going to use the notes in the major ninth. Okay, so it's C, skip D, go to E, skip F, go to G, skip A, go to B, skip C, go to D. This creates our ninth chord here. So we're only going to use melodically these notes. Okay, and then what we're going to do though is add in what's called that 10th as an additional note. Technically we're using E down here, so that's the same note anyway. So we're going to, in our melody, we can only use these notes, and then I'll give you guys an additional rule that you can add to create melody. Okay, so again, we're on piano because I found that stringed instruments are the best way to learn melody, because they have a very predictive harmonic structure. Okay, so now let's speed up this melody a little bit. One way we could create a melody is simply going up the chord notes. So we're just going upward. And then on that last note, we can add the E. Okay, that's a basic way to do stuff, but let's get a little more fancy. There is no rule like you have to do this and then you must go to this note and then you have to go to this note. We're simply going to play the notes. So here are the notes. So in this case, I'm going downwards and I'm also playing the entire chord. I'm playing the 2 notes at the bottom and then I'm starting my downward arpeggio. Okay, so let's record this in. And then I'll show you guys what this looks like. And then that's where I would normally switch chords. Now let me tap out the tempo that I'm playing at. So somewhere, it's weird, it's tricky. So I don't know, my brain can't figure out what time signature I'm in. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Anyway, at this point I would switch the chord. So I'm just gonna give you guys, I'm gonna use my ear. So my ear wants to hear E. So let's skip every other note going down the scale. And now we have the next 9th chord. And so what you're really doing is playing 2 chords and then we add the technique to it to make it sound more advanced. Okay, now some of the notes triggered. Let's quantize these notes because right now it's a little sloppy. I'm playing kind of fast. And let's remove any overlaps. So notice too, when I play piano, the notes are overlapping. I'm using what's called a sustain pedal. Most people, when they program melodies, their melodies look like this. And they're like, why does my melody sound hollow? It's because there's no note overlap, which creates a resonance in your actual mix. So I'm gonna get rid of some of these notes here. Didn't we quantize? Okay, let's re-quantize. Somehow my quantize unquantized. Maybe I hit the wrong combination. Okay, so we're gonna go in and edit. So what I'm showing you guys here is to have confidence that once you understand chords, that will unlock melody potential for you guys. And this is what everybody wants to skip. And this is why in our music theory essentials, we start with music theory in a day. This is going to set the foundation for your training, scales, understanding the basics of tone, music theory and terminology. From music theory in a day, then you move into chord magic. Chord magic is all about the foundation of melody. Like melody derives from harmony. So for example, I could play or I could play it this way. Forgot the chord progression, I played that fast. Now, again, I would have to practice that, but my point is that it sounds melodic because we're adding a time difference between those notes. But really, underneath the hood, the structure or the form of it is that harmony bass. Let's try some more chords. See how the harmony is the thing that guides the melody through the track. So you'll notice, it just depends on how you guys produce. But normally when I first start all my records, it's harmony first because you can derive a bass line and you can derive a melody from there. Okay, so now you guys understand that. The question is, how do we change it up? So let me show you guys some more advanced techniques here because now we're getting into deeper music theory. You won't understand this 100%, so don't try to take notes at this point. You're just listening. We're just listening here. What I want to do is add a turnaround chord. Okay, and I say chord because we are going to pull from the structure of the melody. So far we have C major ninth and D minor ninth part. Now, for those who understand deeper music theory, you'll understand that D is the second of the scale, and we could do what's called a 2-5-1 chord progression. This is more for jazz and gospel. We can go from here, from D, we can go to the 5th scale degree. So it's 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th. So now we can add what's called the 5th scale degree in here because the 5th naturally wants to come back down to the 1st. Okay, so now we're in this chord progression, we're going to find a way to add the 5th. So right here where we have this last structure, I'm going to add this chord. Now this would be the normal voicing for it, but to me it sounds boring. So we're going to raise what's called the 5th and the 9th. So we're going to use these notes. Let's map these out. I'm going to pause the screen and just map these out. All right, so here is the voicing for that G dominant 9th chord. You guys don't have to memorize the terminology. Just listen to the tone. Now I'm debating raising it up an octave. And then it loops back into the beginning. So what I'm trying to tell you guys is melody doesn't just randomly jump from one note to another note. You can translate what's in your brain into the computer. That is part of melody. And sometimes you just freestyling and that's how it comes out, which I don't think about music theory when I'm just freestyling a melody. But when you dig deeper into harmony and understand the 2, the 5, the 1, the dominant to tonic resolution, stuff I teach in the music theory essentials, it will make you understand the patterns and make you not have to guess as much. Let's raise that up an octave just to see what it sounds like up an octave. And that could be a variation. So let's try both. So let's copy it over. Let's hear these both. I'm gonna show you guys another, as a bonus, I'll show you guys another way to, now there's many ways to end your melodic structures. It doesn't always have to be the dominant chord. But to be short, we are going to copy this 2 more times and I'll show you guys a couple techniques. So the first one is called a substitution. Again, I teach this stuff in our music theory essentials course. So if you ever feel like I'm moving too fast, no worries. Let's pull this up an octave, and I figured I'd clone the notes by accident. So let's do this again. And let's pull this up an octave. we're going to do what's called a tritone substitution, which is to pull this down 6 semitones, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this will be basically, instead of jumping 7 notes back down, we're going to go 1 note, which is called a half step away from C. So let's hear what this sounds like. And also too, we have the same top note. So a couple things before we play this entire melody through is I want you guys to listen for the endings. Okay, as we listen, let's pull this down and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I guess it's the same note either way. Now, if you guys don't have a MIDI controller, what you could do is go to your tools, go to Humanize. You could use this function here. I'd recommend that you download also the Remove Overlaps Piano Roll script from the Image Line forums. You have to search this on Google. It does not come with the program. So I'd recommend this one. Once you use Humanize, it offsets all the notes, and some of the notes may overlap. So basically in FL Studio, if notes overlap, it mutes the note. Okay, so you want to go to Remove Overlaps to prevent that issue after you humanize, and that will give you more of a realistic playing style, even if you clicked in your notes. So let's hear what we have so far, starting all the way back from the beginning. All right, so you see how the melody keeps flowing? It's because of all these principles of dominant to tonic, and we're creating these small change-ups that keep the ear engaged without pulling us too far away from the theme of the melody. Another technique I like to do is hit shift up and down to transpose the key. So this will simply help your ear get used to other keys. We're not naturally used to producing in B major or E flat minor, so we need to sometimes transpose to hear what it sounds like. So now we're, in the scale B major. And another way to enhance your melodies is simply add density. So let's add this bass note down here. We changed keys, so my brain is like trying to figure out what the next note is. Okay, so we're going to add B, C sharp all the way through. And here at that last note, we want the F. We're just going to copy this note down an octave. Oops, I didn't line that up. All right, so that was my mistake. So I'm going to take the time to add this bass line. All right, so here's what it sounds like with the added bass. Now keep in mind we can also do a double layer, so we could pull this down even to another layer. And it just adds more landscape for the music. Okay, so it just has a nice flow. Now, another exercise you guys could try is changing the octave, especially for piano, and then we're going to change out the sound. So notice I wrote the music first, and then I changed the sound after. Let's hit Control down. Now we just pulled the piano down an octave. So if I were writing a song, we could have different variations. Now when it gets to that low note, I might pull that back up an octave. Okay, so I'm just showing you guys different combinations, and then we could just swap out the sound completely, replacing this with something else. For now, let's just do a different FL Studio plugin. Let's see. And when you get into synthesizers and more synthetic sounds, you could do quirkier things like pitch bends. Let's see where we could add a couple pitch bends. I'm not going to take this video so long because it's already long. Let's add E piano. So this one sounds dope because it's very piano-esque. But because it's a synth, we could do cool stuff in FL Studio because it's an image line plugin, I should say. There's a lot of things we could do, but I'll just show you guys a couple because this video could be 10 hours long. Okay, so we're going to take one of these notes. We're going to double click on it and change the color. This is changing what's called the MIDI channel. So this, you got to be careful doing this. But basically we're going to select another note that's, and we're going to change the color to match. And basically you could double click and make this a slide note or portamento note, depending on which style you want. And basically this note will slide to this note, only that note. So that's a nice way to add little change ups. Let's pull it up an octave. So that's a way to create little in-between notes that you can't just write in music theory. You have to program it in. Now, the difference between a slide note and portamento is that portamento re-triggers, whereas slide just takes one note and it changes the tuning, whereas portamento plays two notes. But you can't hear it because the pitch bends so fast. So that one, you're not really going to hear that difference. Another thing we could do is pitch bend the entire chord. I would not recommend this. It's convoluted, but basically we're going to add a slide note and we're going to add it a whole step up. And then we're going to transpose everything, or at least that chord, down. This is why it's convoluted, because you have to understand what you're doing here. And then we're going to pull this down however many notes above the top note that the slide note is. So long story short, we're going to pull this first chord, or the first impact, down 2 semitones, so that the final note is the actual target note. So it goes, and but you have to know what you're doing with that technique, or else you could easily mess up your chord. So that's how you add a little more fantasy type movement into your chord progression. And again, at this point, you would just simply swap out the sounds. So now I'm just going to pick random sounds. Okay, so we can go on and on and on, but it starts with the music theory. So if you want to learn more, go to busyworksbeats.com/music theory essentials, and you guys will learn so much more. Okay, so if you guys want to get started for free, just go to busyworksbeats.com/music theory. I'll leave all the links below. Peace out, guys.